I've been seeing a lot of takes lately that are idolizing the French and the resistance and all that stuff, and then comparing it to Americans being not at all like that. And I want to push back against that. Because A, it gives us like no hope. It's like, whatever, I guess Americans are just gonna just take it. But it's also missing a lot of important context that as a US American who's been living in France for 7 years now and I'm married to a Frenchman, I know a little bit more about France now, and so I can give some context that may A, help you stop idolizing French people so much. Also, maybe drawing on some of their tactics and really appreciating them at the same time. And also, know your history. United States has been resisting for a long time, especially the most marginalized. Black people have been fighting back since the beginning. Indigenous people have been fighting back since the beginning. Like basically everybody but white people has been fighting the system for a long time. So really when you talk about Americans not doing anything, they're talking about white people mostly. Although there were lots of white people who have been fighting, and if you, and as hard as it is to find examples of it, there are plenty of white people who have also been fighting. Now this is the children's version of Howard Zinn, but if you're kind of new to this work and you really need some hope, read The People's History of the United States. If you need a first baseline place to start out, to see that the United States is not just this passive, blah, stupid people, blah. Like I know why we have that reputation. It's not full of like these random heroes that just pop up out of nowhere. No, it is like Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did not just come out of nowhere, okay? There's so many people that were working on the ground for a long time. He was just one of many. And that was the whole point of Zinn's books. Now this is the children's version, so it's like even more interesting. I had no idea that on these boats that originally came over to colonize all these places, but a lot of the pirates and a lot of these like awful people were children. They had children on these boats. So this idea that it was even like all these white men doing it, no, these white men brought children to be deckhands and stuff. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I'm a journalist, I'm a storyteller, I do a lot of things. I also have a history degree. And you know what? My history degree is what radicalized me, because that's when I learned that I've been lied to about most of our history, and that actually there is so much hope in our history of the United States, not of the government and of the system and the corporations, but of the people. There's so much history of the people being like, fork you, no. In times like that, I actually want to focus more on that, because this idea that they have sold us in our history books and and again, I did a whole breakdown of the Daughters of the Confederacy and how these white women from the South, from Nashville of all places where I'm from, started a whole thing with 100,000 of these women who literally put textbooks in schools, not just in the South, but especially in the South, that generations of U.S. Americans did not learn their real history. So therefore, we don't even know what the hell happened. And then if we don't go out and do our own research, just continue to not know what happened and not care what happened. How convenient, right? Because it benefits us not to know. But at the same time, none of us are safe. None of us are free till everybody's free. So get on board, learn your history. Start with Howard Zinn if you're new to it. But let me just give you a little bit of comparison of why U.S. Americans do not push back as much as, say, the French. And I believe me, I love this protest spirit over here. I'm going to show you a few examples in a minute. If you are new here, please join my Patreon. That's literally how I get paid to do this. Thank you, Patreon people. You are literally what's keeping me paying my rent right now so I can continue to make videos, because the algorithms aren't reliable. I do lives over there with amazing people. I do travel content. I do personal stories. I'm going to do watch parties soon, and I do hangout sessions. So go on over there. If you can't afford a link, you can just a tier, sign up just so that you can keep in touch. Now, before I forget, if you have not read this article, and it is behind a paywall, but I do believe the New York Times lets you read a few before you have to pay. See if you can find a free version of this. This is a must read. Do not believe. This will make you feel so much better about what's happening right now and how this man and these men do not have as much power as they want us to believe. So please go read this article, because he talks about so many things, but one of the things he talks about is muzzle velocity. Steve Bannon told us exactly what they were going to do, which is just bombard us with all this stuff in the beginning. And the whole point was to exhaust, but it's also to distract, because a lot of the stuff that he's doing, he can't actually do. And the courts are stopping him. And even though he believes he has all this power, as long as we believe that he doesn't actually have all this power, and we push back against every attempt to do all this stuff with power he doesn't have, the more he will be forced into possibly some other consequences, but his own self-deception may be his downfall. Anyway, this is a very hopeful article. Please go seek it out. And look how he is laying right now. Now, this is the like tweet or thread or whatever you want to call it, that it bothered me that there was 48 shares and this many likes. And it's not that this is I'm not showing the person's name because I don't want to I don't know this person or their work. I don't want to bring heat to them. I don't have time to do a deep dive. I want to push back against this narrative because I see it a lot right now. This idolizing of French people, and French people would never let this happen. And in doing so, it's like, well, we're different. This American exceptionalism, again, that like a different way. The French colleague said he'd been reading the U.S. headlines and thought for a couple of them were satire. And when he realized that they were real, he asked me why everyone wasn't protesting in the streets. And I didn't know how to explain to him that some Americans are delighted by what's happening. Yeah, sure. Of course they are. I'm not disputing that. But what this, and the reason why I'm pushing back against this is this person is listening to a French person being like, why aren't y'all protesting? And I say, I have to answer this question on a regular basis. And so that is why I'm answering it right now, because I get so tired of French people being like, what's wrong with y'all? How could you let this happen? Why aren't you out in the streets? Well, let me tell you something. We have way more to lose than French people. We also have in our history does not include Howard Zinn and all these people who have written amazing books that talk about the real history of the United States. And if you're a white person like me who is educated in public schools, especially in the South, in the 80s and 90s, not only was I not told what awful things that my government and my people have done for hundreds of years, but I also was not told of any resistance to that. And I also was not told about all of the resistance and all the things that the Black community, for instance, has been doing for so long and worked so hard and were so successful at. It was just like a little blip in history, like, oh, and then one day Dr. Martin Luther King showed up. You know what I mean? As if that was just like a one-off rather than, like we're all Gotham and just waiting for Batman. And that is not at all the case. It never has been. The people's history, the public history, the real history of anybody but rich white men is not at all about some hero just swooping in and saving the day. That is not true. I'm going to tell you a few things about why it is so easy for people here in France to protest, why they don't even think about it, whereas it's way riskier in the U.S. I'm going to get to that in a second. But also, this is like one of the things that, and again, I don't even know enough, okay? I don't know everything about France. I'm not an expert on France. I'm just literally telling you what I've experienced, because I used to be like, wow, France, oh my God, without understanding any historical context, without understanding that I swear to God, every museum I go to seems to have a whole section dedicated to guillotines and protest or something. I went to a damn puppet museum, like this place, just, puppets, like punching the cop puppet, of course. And even in a puppet museum, I mean, these guys were funny, but I don't know what he's doing right here. In every museum art form here, there's always a room or several rooms. There were several rooms here full of all the stuff about resistance. Y'all, rooms and rooms and rooms dedicated to about this spirit of resistance. This fighting spirit. I mean, on some level, it comes out everyday culture when you're like, can I do this? They're like, no. The French no, as immigrants and expats will call it the French no. French people are like, what are you talking about sometimes when I try to explain it to them? Where it's no. I mean, then you have to be like, okay, maybe. What I'm saying is that I'm not saying that that museums and stuff all over the U.S. don't do. But what I'm saying is that it seems like a very proud part of French history is this world-changing thing that happened. And actually, Haiti's revolution, you should actually look into more, because that's far more inspiring than the French one, okay? Because the French, it's so funny because the hypocrites of the colonizers is always hilarious. Not hilarious, haha, but so ironic. Because the country's so proud of this, right? And then Haiti, it ended up having to pay back France. Just please look into the Haiti revolution. That is literally what, thanks to Haiti, is why we are where we are now in terms of progress. But just this being an important part of French history, I swear, everywhere, just always an acknowledgement. I literally went to a puppet museum that had a Lyon history also, and then I'm seeing pots where they would boil stuff for abortion, I'm just saying, don't let the United States convince you that this is not also part of our history. We just don't, one of the reasons why the U.S. is so successful at diluting us is because Daughters of Confederacy, Moms for Liberty, or whatever, which is a new version of Daughters of Confederacy. And their attempt to write history in a very dishonest way. So especially us white people will keep going along with it. I also, before I continue, want to encourage people to, oh, look at you. Oh my God, don't move off the couch. Okay, he does not want to be on camera. You can see his little ears though. Please, one of my mutuals, Tad Stromer, I'm going to tag him, pushes back against the patriot myth. He's literally like, he's a professor. He's a public historian. I love his work. And he constantly pushes back at the patriot myth. Because if we just understand how much we were lied to about the foundation, the beginning, and like the good guys. People who wrote Evan, the bioethicist, and I were talking about this on my live the other night. But I didn't know the Constitution was like written by like dudes who were like in their early 20s. Because I always saw like the wigs and I thought they were like old. Nope. Go follow Evan if you're not already. So again, this is all the more reason by following public historians, and especially learn Black and Indigenous history in the United States. Because if you start focusing on how much resistance there has always been, then you will not feel so hopeless and desperate right now. As if what's happening it may look different, the context may be different, the details are different, but this is not something just totally new, right? This is not new. It just might be new and scary to a lot of white people, for instance. I also want to encourage people to, so like for instance, Tad suggested this book. It's called Strange Defeat. And this is about Lyon, okay? This is about the resistance in Lyon. This was like one of the headquarters for resistance in Lyon during the Second World War. We had all these caves. And I actually looked up the history of where I live. I live in Villeurbanne, which is the town right next to Lyon. Do you know how much better I felt when I read about all like this one instance of resistance right before Villeurbanne and Lyon were liberated? Because you know what I love to see? It's like there's women out there with, hey, I've been looking more into the history of the people who were here. Some of them are still alive. I've been hanging out with this group of Golden Girls who are like in their 80s and 90s who lived through this stuff. Now they were just like very small children during. But you know what? Like, I went to a festival in September on the 80th anniversary of Villeurbanne being liberated. And I was standing right here. And when I see photos like this, I was like, oh, dang, that's right. Democracy is fragile. And democracy has been hard fought for. And also, there's still a lot of problems, especially here in France, and they're like not wanting to deal with the colonialist past, which is why we're on the fast track to what's happening in the United States. Because if you don't deal with the original problem, which is colonization, white supremacy culture, patriarchy, and all of these systems of oppression that started out a long time. Anyway, whatever that, I'm getting off track. But this whole parade, it was fascinating because I didn't, it's like sometimes, and especially because I grew up in the United States, so I never actually saw it like, I learned so much from my in-laws, from being here, about what it's actually like to be, occupied by Nazis and at war and having war on your soil and stuff like that. And I was like, dang, oh yeah, duh. Like, this was only 80 years ago. This was literally the celebration of the liberation from Nazis of Villeurbanne. And I can't tell you how many protests I've been to since I've moved here. It's just a way of life here. And in fact, if there's one thing I've been trying to do in the last year is be more present in my community rather than just doing stuff online, even though I do have a platform. What I tell people all the time is connect with your community. Because at the end of the day, people in my life are the ones that I will be fighting with the most. And so since I got here, I have been throwing myself into action. This was like 2 days after I moved here. I was a part of a protest. I was so happy to be like, oh, cool, I can do this here a lot. And it's not that we don't have scary police here too, but I'm going to get to this point in a minute because the risk is a lot lower for French people to go out and protest than U.S. Americans. Me personally, it wasn't until I moved to New York City that I actually started protesting and understanding how fun they can be. Like, that's where I met cool people, and there's always drums and all kinds of, like, it actually gave me hope. I love going. Occupy Wall Street really, really taught me a lot about protest. How and how there's a different approach to it. And also, y'all, I was there a lot, but I had to work. I was working 16-hour days in the film industry at the same time. in food. So I would drop off food there all the time. So if you don't have to protest to push back and resist, there's so many different things you can do, especially if you are like the most vulnerable. Maybe you should not be on the front lines. If you're disabled, if you are poor, there's so many people and old people, you know what I mean? And then of course, white people are way more safe at protests. So we should always be on the front line. But I actually learned a lot when I was living in Chile, because guess what? They're fighting against what the legacy of our government screwing their entire country. Read the shock doctrine if you do. You should read that anyway, because that Naomi Klein, literally, like, you can learn so much. That book is, anyway, I learned a lot being down, being like, oh wow, this country is still trying to recover from the United States' impact on destabilizing. And I protested down there. I think this was a student protest because they follow more the American path because of our country and the CIA and what we did to. So they didn't have the same healthcare or school and all the other stuff that like Argentina, for instance, had. Anyway, while I did go to this protest because I was there, I appreciated the one that was the day before. This is the anti-masses protest. That was a little more. But yeah, I don't physically protest all the time anymore. Maybe that's not what you need to do. Maybe you need to donate money. Maybe you need to, but just do something, because doing nothing is how we all get screwed. You don't have to do everything all the time, all at once, because that's not realistic. That's not sustainable. Also, I am no expert on protest. Also, and protesting looks different. So this is like right outside my husband's home. This is the speed detector. All they do is try to destroy this thing. I mean, like, the farmers in France are hilarious because they will ride their tractors all the way to town and block the interstate. Like, they have a long history of doing this. Maybe they're more organized, or maybe they just, are more connected to that resistance speed. Don't you think that is not part of the U.S. American experience? And like I said, Howard Zinn. Also, if you're a white woman and you really want, like, this book right here, okay? If you're a white woman, you need to read books by Black women, especially, about the history of the United States. You may not feel as hopeless right now if you actually understand how much progress has been made, how much resistance there has always been. Even if you maybe, or your group or your ancestors, or you have never been a part of it, doesn't mean it wasn't there. Because even though, for instance, women got the right to vote in 1920, it was not black women, right? But if you don't know that history, you're like, yeah, we just got, and also it took like 100 years to get that right. And it was white women who sabotaged that. I did a whole video about that. I want to show you some statistics so you understand why U.S. Americans don't protest as much. So this is the statistics around the deaths linked to police intervention in France between 2010 and 2022. Look at this. 10 into, it's been increasing a lot, especially in 2021. But at its height, in the last 15 years, we don't have data for the last couple, 52. It seems like on average, it was around like 25 to 27 or something. That is with a population of 68 million. The United States has 335 roughly. The US has about 5 times as many people as France. Let's look at the data on US police unalivings. And remember, this is almost always against the Black community. Not always. Sometimes it tends to be Black or brown men, especially, but not just men. But this is usually not happening to white people, so keep that in mind. 250,000 civilian injuries are caused annually by law enforcement. More than 600 people are unalived by law enforcement in the U.S. each year. So if I do my math, and we say roughly, if France averages like 27 people per year, for instance, although it might be really, really increasing, somebody correct me about this. Okay, I'm just going to round it up to 30. Let's say 30. 30 a year in France times 5. That would be 150 a year. 150 a year versus 600. So I'm not saying that the police are not super violent here at all, okay? I'm not saying that, and that they're not super racist too. But for instance, when this thing erupted, when they unalived a teenager, there was protests all over. And for instance, just one day out of that, they blew up the store across from us. They blew up the store across from us, okay? They don't mess around here. When they protest, they like blow stuff up. I don't mean like blew up a whole building, but they literally put like a tiny bomb thing inside of this cigarette shop. And honestly, it wasn't, whatever. It is that I'm just saying that it is so not the norm here. So let's just put that into context. Do you think that people would protest more if they weren't constantly afraid of being unalived by the police? Not just the police at protests, but just in general, just driving your car, just walking around, right? So despite all of the terrorizing that the police do to the Black community all over the United States and have been since the creation of the police, which was the Slave Patrol, the fact that anybody actively put themselves in harm's way by protest, if especially the darker their skin, is amazing. Like knowing now that they have like literal tanks, and they have Cop City, and they have all of like, so it is such an act of bravery to go anywhere where the police might show up, especially if you are not white, okay? So there's that fact. Now let's talk about some of the other things that a lot of people don't realize. So you may know kind of, but okay, let me give you some examples. First of all, you can just go out and protest and not worry about losing your job, right? And actually, because they have so much, they have 5 weeks of paid vacation. Even like the person who works at McDonald's has 5 weeks of paid vacation. Even people on chômage, okay, that's unemployment benefits, they have vacation. I know that may not make sense to people, but they have all these benefits at like, what they mean by that is that when you're on chômage, which you get like a year or year and a half or even longer sometimes, depending on how long you worked at a place, right? You have, I forget how many weeks, but you just have to tell the government that you're going on vacation so that if for some reason they're like, hey, why aren't you looking for a job? Like you get, do you understand? Even people on chômage have a right to vacation. Okay, so let's talk about people about their security in their work. So first of all, they have time off to actually protest, right? A lot of times protests will happen on the weekend. Well, guess what? Guess who almost never is working on Sundays, for instance? Most people, right? Unless you like work in the restaurant business or hotels or just certain businesses, most people in France do not work on Sunday because, the offices are closed. Their shopping doesn't happen, and some of the grocery stores are open, but they close at noon or 1, okay? So people have time to protest, and they also have job security. So, for instance, now there's a lot of criticism of this particular part because if you have a CDI, which is basically tenure, which, you end up a lot of times getting here in France, like that's the golden ticket. And it's not, when I think it's tenure, I think of like universities and stuff, but no, like CDI is a contract and you have all these rights, all these benefits, and it is really hard to fire you if you have a CDI. Okay? Like it is so hard to fire the worst employee if they have a CDI where they literally have to take you to court. I can't tell you how many people that I know, including my husband, who has worked with some people who were so awful and the boss desperately wanted to fire them, but they had to build a whole case and take them to court to fire them. So you have so much job security here. I mean, I'm a freelancer here, so I have no job security. There's CAF, which helps pay for your rent and housing. There is unemployment benefits, which I don't have access to. If you have children, you have the government subsidizes your babysitting, right? Your child care. So you have so much support from the government, and then on top of that, health care. So if you get injured at a protest, you don't have to worry about that costing all of your savings and going into crushing lifelong debt forever if you get hurt literally anytime, but especially maybe at a protest. You don't have to worry about losing your health insurance if you lose your job because you have the right to health insurance no matter what from just living here. Now people have the whole we're going more towards the American model, unfortunately, with the private insurance subsidizing things, but at the very base, you have pretty cheap freaking healthcare here, and everyone has a right to it. Even if you don't legally live here, you can still have cheap healthcare. And you also don't have to worry about losing your housing. It is so hard to kick people out. So in the United States, if you go to a protest, you are risking dying. You are risking, I don't know, maybe getting fired. But if that's why people are so because people can fire you for any reason in the US. There's almost no security unless you work in a place like a union, which again, in the People's History talks a lot about unions and how the unions, there was so much work to start, and now the unions are crumbling, or they're just whatever. But if you go to a protest, you don't have to worry about losing your housing, your job, your housing, and healthcare, because they're not all tied together like they are in the US. Because you could lose your job like that, and now, oh crap, how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to pay for childcare? How am I going to pay for my health bills? How am I going to pay for, like, you can lose everything by losing your job. So for sometimes people going and protesting may actually putting their job at risk, or they never have time off to go protest. Where in France, you have a lot of time off. There's one thing they fight hard for here is time off. Time off. But let's get back to housing. Did you know that between, what is it? Hold on. I was going to look it up because I took a photo shot of it, but I can't find it in my photo. I think it's from November 1st through March 1st, you are not allowed to be kicked out of your housing. You're not. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you're paying. Doesn't matter. You're not allowed to be kicked out because it's cold out. Okay? The tenants have so many rights. The squatters have rights. Like, it takes... I'm in part of a lot of Facebook groups, and some of them are like tenants' rights or some are landlords' rights. And a lot of people, especially U.S. Americans, come here and they just want to buy some property and rent it out and make a lot of money. Good luck. Good luck. Because if you have a squatter in your house, you're not getting rid of them for a long time. Because you got to go through all these steps, and they may destroy your home while doing it. I know somebody who I don't know the whole laws around this, but she didn't pay rent for like over a year. And she knew they couldn't kick her out because she has children under the age of 18. Like, they have a lot of rules about what landlords can do if you have someone over 65 in your home or somebody who is vulnerable and all this stuff, so that if you can't pay, CAF will come in. Like, there's so much security here. So much security here. So if you have that much security and you have a long history of being taught about the history of resistance in your fucking history, do you think perhaps you might protest all the time too? And also because it's so built into your history and you saw your parents doing it, and you see like when the Olympics were here and they had they had the football or soccer games here in Lyon. They had some of them here. Most of them were in Paris, but they had some here. Do you know what? The firefighters are like, good luck. You haven't given us bonuses. You haven't been, like, y'all are not paying us enough and you want us to do all this extra work. Good luck keeping that stadium safe. And they threatened to strike. Strikes are such a big part of this culture. They strike all the time. They strike so much here, especially with the trains, that before you travel, you really need to, like they will announce it. We're going to be striking all these times, so you better plan accordingly. They were going to strike this Christmas right before, when my family was coming here, and we had all these backup plans, a rental car and all this stuff in case they strike and protest here so much that the whole country has to adapt to it and is just used to this pain in the butt thing happening all the time, and I love it. It's inconvenient sometimes. It's frustrating sometimes. It seems like a little too much sometimes, but in the end, I would much rather this than a place with no security where a lot more risk is involved in protesting and resistance. So the reason why I'm saying all of this, I want to reframe things, because this idea that, like, the United States is not a place that hasn't had a long history of incredibly brave people who have done even more resistance under harder circumstances. You know what I mean? Because it's so easy to frame it as like, wow, the French, they just protest so much and we don't do anything. It's usually white people that aren't doing anything, right? But again, read history. Be inspired by people throughout our history who have been doing a lot of things. Even some white people have been doing stuff. I'm telling you. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Oh, well, we never can have that here. Yes, we can. We have been. Unfortunately, some of us, my people, have not been doing enough. But don't believe it. Don't believe it. If anything, I hope this inspires you even more, that despite all of the risk involved, look how much people are still doing. And could do more, but still do, with none of the security that the French people have when they go out and do it. I don't know. I hope this helps. I just had to say something. And French people, I'm sure you're going to correct me on some of this. I'm sure I don't know anything about France on some level, but I know a lot more than the average American who comments on France. So I don't know. Anyway, please follow my Patreon if you like my work. And let me know if you heard the comment song.
Resistance, comet song. Resistance, comet song. This is a comet song I show photos and videos from stuff I've done, and also on Patreon I do a lot of this. Anyway, resistance, comet song. They're random, but today's is about this theme of resistance. Comet song. Protest is a big thing here, obviously, but it's a different history. They love to burn stuff like trash cans. Trash cans. There's always a burned trash can somewhere in France. Burnt trash cans, resistance. Burnt trash cans, resistance, and instruments and dancing. Just like most protests, dancing, 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 and drums. Resistance, comment song. Comment. Tap, 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 tap your keyboard and leave a comment. This was my first protest here when I moved to Lyon. I mean, look at this scenery as you protest. I mean, look at this. Wow. Anyway, another form of resistance. Listen. Resistance is sleeping too and not doing way more than you can handle. Resistance. Comment song, sweet baby snoring with his little tongue out. Resistance, comment song. Learn from Moses and other people in history. Resistance, comment song. Et voilà.